Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 10. And in this mini lecture, we're going to cover civil rights and Kevin Johnson's Sweet Home Alabama. So I know we've just coming off of exam 2, moving from civil liberties and now to distinguish civil rights. One of the issues a lot of students and a lot of people in society at large conflate the two concepts of civil liberties and civil rights. So as you found out in your reading, we're already able to distinguish. You've already taken some questions on what are civil liberties. So civil rights will be the grounding on where we're headed into the final, going to our final exam. And also thinking about a contemporary topic, immigration, which has always been a topic in United States history and the formation of citizenship laws and naturalization and as forth. But now how Kevin Johnson in the reading that you're taking up this week centralizes the notion of immigrant rights as civil rights. And what does he mean by that? And we'll be moving towards a broader understanding of what that means. So this is a very, what I'm providing, I'm going to upload, well, you're going to have this, these are my PowerPoints that go alongside the publisher's PowerPoint. So this is something I've created in addition to, and I usually do this in class, but we'll see, and I think this will be of assistance to you as you're reading and thinking about. There's a lot of clips here that you can watch, so I will upload this as soon as I complete this. You'll have the entire PowerPoint presentation along with all the video links to help you think about civil rights and what it means in our contemporary society. So I just want to move through a couple of the slides here. And here's a clip that's kind of dated, but you see this clip was on Trump's campaign at the time and how it was drawing, on some of these white nationalist movements. But when we're thinking about civil rights, we're thinking about the law and the lawmaking process. And what part of illegal don't you understand about anything? Well, what we want to understand when we take up these conceptions of what is legal, what is not legal, is how the laws were made in the first place and who they specifically targeted. Right? So all these systems that we find, namely racial separation in South Africa or racial separation in the United States, those were legal systems. We may find a reprehensible. The project that led to the ultimate Holocaust, that was state policy, meaning legal. The system of slavery, as we know, was legally codified in our Constitution. We may find that reprehensible, but it was the law of the land. And the project of colonialism, of course, in many shapes and forms, continues to be legal. So as this slide mentions, legality and justice are many times on polar opposites, right? So legality, when we're thinking about the law, and those of us who are thinking of going to law school, and that's going to be our legal training, the law is premised on who has the power at any given moment to make the law, meaning to write it. Right? Not all of us partake in that process. Not all of us have influence in that process. And lawmaking, as Walter Benjamin, the 20th century social theorist, has mentioned, is power making. It's as simple as that, but much more complex, right? So civil liberties, to distinguish these constitutional freedoms that Americans enjoy and which the government may not encroach upon, and that are to be found in the original first 10 Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. To distinguish from, where we're moving now, civil rights, protections against unequal treatment that the government guarantees to all groups, equal treatment in front of the law. So here you see an image of African Americans still on the march for equal rights, and to bring in an image of what Kevin Johnson sees immigration as fundamentally about civil rights. And what does he mean? And that's the argument that he'll be taking on in his very short PDF that you have to read this week. So discrimination, de jure, by law and regulations. And I'm going to move very swiftly through these slides. You have them at your disposal as to guide your thought process, your reading and thinking about these issues, what it means in U.S. society, specific cases from your textbook that are very formational in thinking about race relations and injustice today These issues are very much with us, very much due to the fact of lawmaking processes that targeted specific groups throughout. The black codes, convict leasing, exclusion at the polls, plus many more cases as we're moving through. Hernandez v. Texas, not really very well known, but it's a case dealing with basically targeting Mexicans in Texas and not being able to sit on juries until this case settled that question in 1954. And there's a link that if you're interested, you could watch this on a class apart detailing that case. And then forms of civil disobedience that move to change these. Civil Rights Act. And this, when we're thinking of affirmative action, it becomes a very contentious issue. These cases, policies meant to ameliorate past exclusions. But what I'm trying to get us to think about is how this nation was fundamentally constructed as an affirmative action program for white people. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is a book that I lay out here by the political scientist at Columbia University, Ira Casmelton, who really focuses on the period post-Depression into the Second World War moment and specific governmental programs, namely the New Deal programs that emerged fundamentally as racialized programs to benefit whites only. And we see that in home ownership and the acquisition of wealth and the accumulation of wealth, the rise of the middle class, and the segregation of neighborhoods and henceforth. But this, I want to argue, affirmative action was grounded in the Constitution itself. So it was much prior to where Ira Casmelton begins to really examine this processes in this period. It is the Constitution where the rights and protections and lawmaking protected the interest of the white population. So we have specific cases that you outlined in your textbook. This is where we're thinking from the beginning, are all U.S. citizens equal? We continue to ask that fundamental question. We have movements across the nation right now and disputes the divisions that exist now have always existed, and that's the way the nation was created. It was very divisive, very exclusionary, that third strand of our foundation, inegalitarianism. That is our tradition that we are simply living out today. So depending on race, class, gender, sexuality, able-bodiedness, who gets the rights, who receives the rights and the benefits of full U.S. citizenship. And these are the movements detailed in your textbook. What do we mean by Chicanx, Latinx, or Hispanic? What does that term mean? And these are some of the movements that take place. Boricua, Puerto Rican movement. We're dealing with Puerto Rico right now as a colonial appendage of the United States and is very much in the news cycle on the neglect, but it's always been neglected once it was acquired via this colonial project in 1898. Cubans in post-1959 and the relationship that continues there, the economic embargo, the opening by the President Obama administration, now the retrenchment under this administration. Asian Americans on the move, excluded via citizenship by many laws nationally and here in California. And we know, as I mentioned, this is the 75th anniversary of the Executive Order 9066 targeting Japanese Americans and placing them in concentration camps here, many here in California. The American Indian movement, there you see an image of them who, part of their protest was with the flag, which they found as an offense to the very existence of the United States, upon them, right? And this is how they used the flag, an upside down flag, as a symbol of their resistance. So this concept of settler colonialism, the displacement, the acquisition, and the control over indigenous populations continues. Many academics study this as a phenomenon that continues to occur. We may know as gentrification. So it is not a fixed moment in history. It is a continuous project. Women's rights, LGBTQ rights, where we saw a fundamental gain on June 26, 2015, when the Supreme Court ruled and opened the door for marriage equality. And there's a clip on that you can watch there. age and disability, fairly recent laws to ameliorate the exclusion of these groups, 1967, and the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, in 1990. That is very recent. And we here on campus are barely, reconstructing the spaces in the classroom to make them accessible. Immigration. Kevin Johnson, this is where we get why is it an issue about immigrant rights. So his central argument that you find on page 22 is there are many likenesses to the South's policies, and specifically he focuses in on the states' rights argument, on how states are backing that argument, using that argument to support or back their moves towards creating naturalization policies. He focuses on Arizona, Alabama, and how that functions. So as you're taking up this chapter and taking up this context, really reflect on the constitutive nature of immigration and civil rights, and does that make sense? Okay, so that'll be it for now. We'll touch base next week, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your posts as you're thinking about these questions. Goodbye.